This time we got another steel type deck for Neo on. This one's a little bit more technical. It's not like your Aquapolis Scizor or your Steelix decks where it's just attach energy, deal lots of damage. This time we're looking at Dark Scizor, and just from its name and its typing, you already know what this deck's going to be. It can utilize both Special Dark and Special Metal energies. Both of its attacks use colorless only, so you can actually use whatever combinations of those metal and dark energy that fit your needs for each particular situation. So of course the special metals will reduce incoming damage and keep Dark Scizor alive longer. That way you can get off a Threaten every single turn and pretty much reduce your opponent's hand size, take away all of their trainer resources. But Threaten also lets you look at your opponent's hand every time you use it, so that will give you a good idea so that you can gauge when your opponent is going to have a lull in their strategy, when you have an opportunity to use Slash instead of Threaten. That's where the darkness energies are going to start coming into play. So as you set up your Scizor, you should have a pretty good idea of what your opponent is also setting up, what their strategy is going to be, and based on that, that's how you're going to decide on whether or not to load Scizor with those steel energies. That way all of the incoming damage is reduced, or if you want to lean more to the side of darkness energies where every time you get a chance to use Slash, you get that beefed up damage from it. It's a lot like in base set era where you kind of had to play some mind games in your head and accurately predict how your opponent was going to switch out and stuff. That way you know how to play those plus powers. This is going to be the same way but with those darkness energies. But you won't be completely relying on Threaten in order to reduce your opponent's hand size and their trainer utility cards. This is also a NocLock deck, so you're going to have Noctowl as support in looking at your opponent's hand, getting rid of those trainers off of the coin flip, and giving you a lot more opportunities and chances to attack with Slash and deal those increased amounts of damage. As you may have predicted, we will be utilizing Aquapolis Furret in order to streamline the entire deck and get those special energy cards very quickly and in whatever variance of proportions you're going to need them. So if you want to go 2 metal, 1 dark for a Slash, or if you want to go all 3 dark on your Scizor, whatever order you want to grab those out of your deck, Furret will allow you to do that. And that is the fun of running this deck. Not only is it a control deck where you're looking at your opponent's hand and discarding trainers multiple times per turn, but you can also transform Scizor into a low damage tank or an absolute glass cannon, and anywhere in between, depending on how you choose to place those special energies. So what does this full deck look like? Let's get into it. Per the Scizor Huge, I'm using that Aquapolis Scyther that has 50 HP. You can attack for 1 colorless, and so it doesn't complicate the deck too much. There are plenty of Scythers that you can use. I just got used to using this one when I was playtesting those SMF builds, and so I just carried it over for this one. So 3 Scyther, 3 Dark Scizor. I decided to include a Japanese Dark Scizor in there just to kind of showcase how much better I think the Japanese Steel type cards look. The English ones are much darker and they don't read as well. But either way, 3-3 on that Dark Scizor line. I don't think this card saw nearly as much play as it should have, given how versatile it actually is. Just the ability to utilize Special Dark and Special Metal make it pretty unique for this era of the TCG. And on top of that, it's just a great NocLock partner because you can utilize multiple Noctowls per turn using that Glaring Gaze in order to look at your opponent's hand, potentially discard cards. And if you need to, you can also threaten that same turn as your attack. So as early as turn 2, you can completely deplete your opponent's hand of trainer cards. So I'm also running a 3-3 line of that Neo Genesis Noctowl, and Noctowl's got free retreat too, so if you need to double gust yourself out of some special conditions or something, this is a great way to do it. Put Noctowl in your active position. I'm also using Murkrow in this deck that also has free retreat, so you can always just double gust and then swap right back into a Dark Scizor. 2-2 of that amazing Aquapolis Furret that's going to allow you to get pretty much any type of energy you want, including special energy cards, right out of your deck. You do have to toss back in 2 cards from your hand, but if you can get at least 1 Dark Scizor, 1 Noctowl, and 1 Furret out on turn 2, which is pretty easy to do with the supporters included in this build, you're good to go, and this deck runs so smoothly. I think it even runs a little bit smoother than SMF. Although SMF does have a lot more raw attack power with heavy metal, as well as some other problematic things, but this Dark Scizor build does have some interesting ways to deal with any problematic opponents you can come up against, mainly Murkrow, which is why I have 2 copies of that card in here as well. That's going to be key in dealing with a lot of matchups, and I'll get to that in the discussion at the end of the video. As for the trainer lineup, I'm going to be running a couple of Professor Elm. The reason I'm only doing that is because most matchups are going to have Cleffa in there, and so let your opponent get off an Eek, and that's when you're going to come in with a Copycat and basically get an Eek of your own for free off of this Copycat. Even if your opponent isn't using a turn 1 Cleffa, you can still capitalize on whatever draw power they use on their turn with Copycat. We also have Pokemon Fan Club, which is going to really help get that set up. If you've already got your Scythers, your Hoot, and your Sentret down onto the bench, it's going to be so much easier to just go ahead and get all 3 of your key evolution cards on your next turn, evolve everything at once, and have your setup. And from there, it is smooth pumpkin pie, especially with a full playset of Pokemon Trader. That way, if you've just got like a handful of extra Hoots or something, you can just use Pokemon Trader and get out your Furrets and your Scizors that you need. One of the few cards from Legendary Collection that was reprinted that actually adds to the metagame, increasing the amount of evolution lines and different kinds of Pokemon that you can have in one single deck. Pokemon Trader really helps streamline all of that. Using a full playset of Double Gust as well, like I said earlier, your Noctowls and your Murkrows are going to have free retreat, so Double Gust can create some really good combos for getting out of special conditions, and also pulling out some vulnerable Pokemon that Murkrow can trap in the active position with Mean Look. Because Scizor only has 70 HP, that does put it in range of some Okos, so it's going to be important not only to strategically place those special metals on there to reduce incoming damage, but also to keep a Goldberry on there whenever it is vulnerable. The Stadium in this deck is also going to boost that HP a little bit, though you do have to be careful with it as well. Goldberry is going to be your primary method of keeping those Dark Scizors alive. That way you can use Threaten whenever you need to, and in between turns when you know that your opponent doesn't have trainers in their hand that they can utilize, that's when you're going to use Slash, maybe do a little bit extra damage if you've got a Darkness or 2 on there. When you lose a Dark Scizor, or for any other circumstance where you're having to discard your special energies, Power Charge is going to help you get those right back into your deck. Then you can utilize Furret to get them out of your deck, right back into your hand. It's a beautiful circle of energies. And then I got Town Volunteers to assist in that recycling and get back any lost Pokemon that you need to get back into play. And then a couple of copies of Rocket's Hideout to boost the HP of Dark Scizor. That way you don't have to rely too heavily on those special metals to make it tanky. Rocket's Hideout is going to assist in that as well and work very well with Goldberry to keep those Scizors alive. That way you can do all the threatening you want to and slashing in between. Just be mindful of your Rocket's Hideout. You don't want to give your opponent an advantage over you by playing Rocket's Hideout if they're playing something like Dark Houndoom or Dark Gengar. And now we've got all of our special energy cards, full playset of special metal, full playset of special dark. I'm also going to be using double colorless energy in this deck. Not only is it going to let you get a slash off on turn 2 with Scizor, you're not going to get any of the bonuses as you would with the metal or dark, but if you just want to start dealing damage quickly, or it's going to give you a faster way to attack with some moderate damage with Furret or Noctowl. A lot of players will make the mistake of running a deck like this thinking that Scizor and Murkrow are going to be their only attackers and completely forget about their support Pokemon. With double colorless, you can get off some pretty quick attacks and some decent chunks of damage with a Furret. And if you're up against a Muck or a light Dragonite that really messes with your strategy a little bit, you may have to rely on attacking with a Furret or a Noctowl for a couple of turns. You can also drop a quick double colorless if you need a Dark Scizor out of play really quick. Go ahead and just drop it and instantly discard it for that retreat cost. And then finishing the deck with 3 Recycle Energy, which can also just be attached to whatever and will return to your hand. You don't have to worry about losing them. So what are the major weak points of this deck and how do you deal with them? First and foremost, it's Scizor, so it's weak to fire. There's no muck in this deck, so you are super weak to Entei, Murkrow, and Charizard, all big fire types that rely on their powers. There's not really a way for this deck to step in the way of that. You really just have to slow them down by limiting their trainers and hope that you can gain the edge on them that way. Much like SMF, the biggest threat to this deck might be Dark Houndoom. Because it is a fire type, it can OHKO Dark Scizor, and it's also going to be able to utilize Rocket's hideout and give them a little more advantage than it's going to give you. If you do anticipate any fire types, then you can go ahead and make room in this deck for a couple of Mantine, and then maybe replace the 3 recycle energy with water energy, and then just use Furret's power to get those water energy quickly, get them on Mantine, and hopefully that's going to give you some OHKOs early game against those powerful fire types before they can wreak too much havoc on you. As I've said in other videos, I don't really like Mantine as the go-to water type tech against fire decks, but when you've got a crowded deck like this, you don't have a whole lot of room to expand into water type evolution, so in this case, Mantine is kind of your best bet. Dark Octillery and Light Golduck are also pretty solid choices for water type attackers, but they are going to require a little bit more work than Mantine, and depending on the scenario, may not work out as well. Light Dragonite can cause some trouble because its Miraculous Wind is going to completely shut down all of your special energy cards, but that power is only active when Light Dragonite is in the active position, and that's where Murkrow is going to come in and be really helpful. As you can double gust that Light Dragonite away, pull something else out for the active position, and then trap it there with Mean Look. And from there, you can just use Murkrow's Feint Attack to slowly chip away at Dragonite, and hopefully your opponent doesn't get their own double gust or a different method to get it back in the active position. The same kind of goes for Muck. If your opponent lays down a Muck, a huge portion of this deck is shut down. Now, you're still going to be able to utilize those special energy with Dark Scizor and get those bonuses, but you're not going to be able to recycle them as easily with Furret, and you're not going to be able to look at your opponent's hand as much with Noctowl's power shut down. And again, that's where Murkrow's going to step in and help you deal with that. You pull that Muck into the active position and just attack it until that Muck is gone. Or if you're lucky, you can pull out a Grimer and try to knock it out before your opponent can evolve it up into Muck. Trapping Muck in the active spot is going to be the best way to deal with it. Most decks that run Muck don't run the grass energy or enough rainbow energy to ever allow it to attack. The opposite's going to be true for Pichu. Pichu can wreak some havoc on this deck as well, since Furret and Noctowl are going to get hit by Zap. But if you have an attacking Pichu in your opponent's active position, send that thing to the bench, pull out a Murkrow, trap something else in the active position. That way the Pichu's not going to give you any trouble. And that's pretty much how you're going to deal with a lot of problems with this deck. You're just going to send whatever the problem is away and have Murkrow in your active position using Mean Look, trapping something else in its active position, and then just using Feint Attack over and over again. Pretty classic stuff that's been around ever since Murkrow was released. And that's going to be Dark Scizor NocLock. Let me know what you think about this deck. Let me know how you would run this deck. If you've got any Neo on request decks, chuck them down there in the comments. Link to all my socials will be in the description. And I will see you next video. Bye!